Bill Betcher, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. The top 10 questions you need to ask every mass notification vendor. Going through our agenda for today, we've got expert Greg Griffin and Ahmad Moleen on the line to share with you the 10 new questions and the follow-up questions you need to ask every mass notification vendor. These questions will help you quickly cut through the clutter and find the information you need to make the most informed decision possible. At the end of today's session, we'll give you a chance to put Ahmad on the hot seat and have him answer your questions. As a reminder, please don't forget you can submit your questions at any time during the webinar. The best way to submit your questions is to type them into the open text field in the question panel. We are going to be recording today's session, and we'll make a link to that available on our blog within a few days of today's session. You can also look for a link to the recordings on our website at everbridge.com under the resources section. If you're on Twitter, we encourage you to take a moment to follow us at Everbridge and use the webinar hashtag Everbridge to share snippets of the insights in today's program with your followers, and we'll retweet some of your comments. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Greg Griffin is the principal consultant of Greg Griffin Consulting. He'll be presenting first. Greg has 37 years of experience providing solutions to finance, retail, and educational markets. Since 2005, Greg has been helping corporations and higher education institutions select emergency and mass notification systems. Our other presenter today is Ahmad Moleen, the Chief Strategy Officer at Everbridge. Ahmad was co-founder of Cloudflare, which was acquired by Everbridge. Prior to co-founding Cloudflare, Ahmad served as the Chief Technology Officer of CompuWare's APM Solution Division, formed after the company acquired Gomez. At Gomez, Mr. Moleen served as the CTO and led the expansion of their product portfolio and market presence. Ahmad is a regular presenter at various industry conferences, as well as a frequent contributor to leading online and print publications, including the New York Times, USA Today, Business Week, Network World, Forbes, and many others. We're excited to have both our speakers with us today, and now I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, Greg Griffin.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be. Before we get to the 10 questions, we have a couple things that we want to talk a little bit about, and that involves some of the changes in the next generation of emergency and mass notification systems that will be so important to us in the next few years. Mass notification is certainly changing quickly. This presents, however, new challenges, but new opportunities. Social media has changed so much over the past couple of years. It's not just college kids texting anymore. People are sharing information in real time. Social networks like Facebook and Twitter are something that everybody uses. Anymore, breaking news from around the world, regardless of whether it has to do with governments being overthrown or weather, has been spreading through social networks faster than it has in any other medium. If you look at the second section of mobility, there's 5.9 billion mobile devices worldwide, and if your house is anything like ours, it seems like a third of them are in your own home. The rate of growth is just incredible, and it's going to continue. Data, the data information or information is just growing by leaps and bounds. If you can properly sort it out, this information can provide invaluable insight to breaking news stories, public opinion, online trends, and more. And finally, the cloud that has been talked about so much for the past few years. The computing power of the cloud is here. And if instead of installing software in using your own premise devices, the software solutions can be hosted across the internet. This increases by leaps and bounds accessibility, extensibility, redundancy, and resiliency. As you can see, with these four parts of the new world, not only has the technology changed, but the expectations of the users has changed. and it's constantly changing. It's going to change faster and faster. The point is that mass notification systems must keep up with this trend. The other area that we would like to discuss before getting to the 10 questions would be the components of a emergency notification system. All three of these are required and to be successful in order to send out a notification. From the left side to the right, architecture is something that's so important, but you just don't see. And you want to be sure that if you pick a vendor, or as you're looking at vendors, that their architecture is solid. System resiliency, redundancy capability, load capacity, speed, data storage, multi-device ability, and security are all in the background, and nobody really sees it, but it's the engine of the system. The capabilities of the system are your features and functions. Is it a highly functional system full of gadgets that look great in a demo, but will they be useful? Is there and certainly ease of use. We'll talk about ease of use a little bit later, but is the system easy to use, and what happens in a crisis with regard to the operator? Is the operator going to be able to handle the system or get caught up in the gadgets? The tracking and reporting capabilities of the system are incredible. As soon as you add social media and mobile devices, the whole side of the tracking and reporting becomes either more cumbersome or a lot easier to work with, depending on the system. And finally, best practices. And no system's worthwhile unless the operator knows what messages to send and how to send them. This is where strong training, this is where tech support, and this is where system flexibility come in. And you must have all of these in order to send a single solid message to get a good response. And now on to the top 10 questions. The first question, is emergency notification your primary business? Why this matters? Well, prospective users need to be comfortable that their provider or their potential provider is committed to mass notification. This would include things like system design, updates, support, and a general commitment to R&D to handle these new technologies. A portion of our webinar today will discuss mass notification's role in the continuing evolution of social media and mobile media. A mass notification provider, you've got to have a plan for the future and commit to supporting new technologies. You've got to find out if a vendor's focused on mass notification, or is it just a side business to that company. If a vendor's primary business is telecom or telemarketing or collections, and they might consider adding a mass notification system because they own a large bank of phones. Well, this can be a fuzzy area because the business that you're dealing with may not have mass notification as their primary source of income. And if that's the case, then you may not have a situation where they're totally committed to mass notification for the future. Finally, be aware that some notification systems OEM their systems from and to someone else, and this cannot be good and can lead to finger pointing and kind of an abdication of the entire support process. Now, in talking to Ahmad, we know that Everbridge, this is their primary business. What investments has Everbridge made in the past 12 months that have allowed them to improve functionality on the system?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for the intro. So I would say that, yeah, this is I think a pretty fundamental question people need to ask, right? If you get to a point where the potential vendor is just going to throw in mass notification as an add-on to whatever else they're trying to sell you, that should really get your attention and start you asking some deeper questions. But Let me answer the question directly. What have we done? It is our primary business. It is our only business at this point in time. That's what we do. We spend our time thinking about what it means to send out emergency and mass notifications to people. We know exactly what people feel, that anxiety that they have when they've got that shaky finger and are about to press that button because they're about to send out a notification to potentially hundreds of thousands or potentially even millions of people. And they want to make sure that everything works and will work and works fine. So part of what we do is think about what that means. How can we make that better? How can we make it faster, less error prone? So in the past 12 months, boy, I could go on and on about what we've done. But we've done everything from just increase the raw capacity, the raw volume that the system can improve or can take on, to adding an industry-unique elastic infrastructure so that if there is an absolutely extraordinary event that we can very quickly, pretty much in real time, acquire additional resources on additional servers and networks in a variety of different areas. We can actually burst our capacity and really never run out of capacity. We've added native mobile applications from which that people can use to send and receive notifications. Full-fledged, full-featured mobile applications as opposed to just a thin veneer like some others have added across the board. We've engineered the user interface. We've put in 10 years worth of thinking and experience and feedback into it, just as I mentioned before, in order to reduce the error rate and that anxiety that people might feel. We've added new delivery methods. As Greg said, technology is moving and moving pretty fast. So while we still have to support faxes and tap pagers because they're still not going away, believe it or not, now we have to also support things like push notifications to mobile applications, which are neither SMS nor voice. There's an entire gamut of delivery methods that we have to support simultaneously. So all of that is in really just the past 10 to 12 months, and there is a lot more to come. But again, hopefully that gives you an idea as to what it means when emergency and mass notification is your primary business. That's where all our investment goes. Back to you, Greg.
Question number 2, how did your system perform? Well, why this matters. One of the most important components of a mass notification system is the architecture. What type of system is best suited for your current needs, your future needs? How does the system secure the environment in a way that will withstand a rigorous test? 4 basic architecture models, and you all know them if you've looked into this industry at all. But if you haven't, there's a premise. And that system is you buy the hardware, the software, and you host. This is totally your system. The problem is that it's expensive, and because of that, you can get behind on software and redundancy updates. Second system is a hosted system, and that is a subscription type system that the vendor hosts. And the hosted system is much less expensive to get into, and it puts the responsibility of software updates, redundancy, capacity, those types of things on the host, so on the vendor. So you want to be sure that a vendor will provide the capacity increases and updates that you would expect. You also want to know, do they charge extra for these capacity increases and updates? Third type of system, and you don't see many of these, is a hybrid. It's an interesting thing that you host and they host, and there's, but you can run into the same problems that you can with a premise system. What if you have a fire or a flood and your system is within one of your buildings? Well, then yikes, you've got a big problem. The fourth is a SaaS system, and it's of course similar to the hosted system. It's a subscription system. It's the newest technology out there, and that is, or the newer technology that's out there, and the majority of the decisions made over the past couple of years have involved discussions about SaaS. 2 other important considerations. Does the vendor own their own architecture? As we stated earlier, some vendors OEM their architecture. This is not good from a support standpoint. Tech support and customization kind of put in the back seat on a situation like that, because you're not directly dealing with the architecture's owner. The other question is, who does the development work? Who does your development work? And that's an important question, only because you want to be able to go to those people in the event that you have a question. You've got to have you must have a vendor that demonstrate the levels of security, performance, and availability versus the cost of maintaining and scaling the system if you were to host or do your own hosting as you go. You also may want to talk to a vendor about things like independent security tests and penetration tests. Now, let's ask Ahmad, how does the Everbridge systems architecture help or hurt you in things like Hurricane Sandy? And also, can we get a copy of your standard SLA? Because people get stingy with those, Ahmad.
All right. So, I think, yeah, I mean, if the bottom line is how do we perform during Hurricane Sandy, I can tell you, I could talk about raw numbers, and they're pretty impressive, but I can, let's go back to one of the things that you said originally in one of your previous slides, which is, there are three components. There's the architecture, the capabilities, and then the best practices. So let me just say that we performed really well during Hurricane Sandy. And as far as SLAs are concerned, I'd be very wary of simply a high-level SLA that might sound good, but that would have very little teeth. So, a bunch of vendors will say, hey, I have 100% SLA, up 100% of the time. Really, how is that going to help you during something like a Hurricane Sandy? The fact that you can actually access the system, and what happens if they don't? Oh, they'll give you a little bit of a credit. Fantastic. Again, when you're dealing with a mass notification system, it's more than simply a 100% SLA. There needs to be a lot more to it than that. So let's talk about the architecture and just simply some raw numbers. So during Hurricane Sandy, we had about 850 different companies and organizations send out about 27,000 broadcasts, over 10 million messages. Okay, so you can say, great, we can handle volume. But then, how can you handle that volume? How well did you do in handling it? And again, some providers might be able to tell you, well, we're really good at getting things out really, really quickly. Good, that's good. We call that a broadcast initiation delay. So how quickly do you actually start making calls or sending out messages? But what's also important is how quickly do you get them? What's your throughput, especially when it's a shared environment, right? So what is the percentage of a broadcast that got completed in the allotted time? So, let me just tell you something. Even though we sent out 10 million messages, our median initiation time was 8 seconds between the time that somebody pressed the button and the message started going out. And 96% plus got done, and that's all the attempts, all the paths. So meaning if I have to select to go to a fourth and fifth and sixth attempt because of a variety of reasons that we'll discuss in just a little bit, still got them done in time. Now, that's just the raw power. Let's talk about the capabilities. Again, you could have all the raw power in the world, but if the system isn't designed the right way, then chances are your broadcast may not be successful, right? Again, is it designed such as it'll minimize the mistakes that you might make? Does it make it easier to follow up? Because again, during a crisis like this, you're not going to just send out one broadcast, you'll send out many. How do you follow up and get the appropriate report as to what happened in a previous broadcast, especially so you can use it during the recovery phase? Will you be able to send the next notification, know exactly what happened, see your overall confirmations across the board, get a good sense for what really is going on with your constituency or your employees or whomever it is that you need to send notification to? That's key to make sure that when you're talking to whatever potential vendors you're interviewing, that you get a sense for their capabilities and how they really help during an event or a crisis like this. And then last but not least, the best practices. Again, something like Hurricane Sandy, we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill crisis over here, right? The broader infrastructure had an issue, right? Central offices were overloaded, in some cases down. Cell phone towers were not available. The internet, in some cases, was down or inoperable. Again, does your system allow you to leverage best practices to ensure that you're increasing the chances of success? So for us, for example, part of what we build in is the ability to always target an individual, to make sure that we are not part of the problem by overloading a system. that we stop as soon as we reach the appropriate individual, that we try in a sensible way multiple times across multiple paths and understand specifically when somebody is about to, when somebody has answered versus whether an answering machine has answered. When we get a confirmation, we can stop, we can report that. So that, again, you can use the follow-up capabilities to make sure you're whittling down the number of people you're contacting and you're keeping track of everything that's happening from an event perspective, that you're sending the right messages, structured the right way, because that makes all the difference in the world. All of that is key. So whether it's the architecture and raw power, the capabilities, or best practices. So how do we perform during Sandy? Extremely well. 10 million messages delivered flawlessly. Back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Ahmad. On to question 3. What mobile capabilities do you support? Mobile devices, as we have mentioned several times, have taken over the world. How is your potential notification system adapting to these constant changes? How do you facilitate two-way, and this is the future, two-way real-time communication? The unprecedented level of mobile connectivity has provided great opportunity for mass notification in addition to the responsibility of being able to handle these. Landline phones are being disconnected everywhere. Today, organizations and communities have recipients opt in to mass notification with mobile contact information rather than pagers, as Ahmad had mentioned, even though they're still around, so that they're more easily reached. But since mass notification is all about reaching the person and not the device, multiple contact paths are essential to successfully communicate with your members. The mobile devices also offer opportunities to reach recipients through ways that landlines and other devices never did. Text, email messages, those were never available with landlines. So if you have a situation where it's imperative to reach someone, obviously the more devices and the more paths you have is critical. On top of providing a tool for end users, both to receive notifications and send valuable information, mobile devices can give administrators an opportunity to receive real-time updates and initiate messages on the go with up-to-the-minute information. The most productive ways to do this, perhaps, given the situation that Ahmad just described with Hurricane Sandy, is through text messaging. And we do want to touch on the dark world of text messaging just briefly. There are several types of text messaging out there. One is SMTP, which was developed mainly for email messages. You want to be sure that the company that you are looking at does true SMS messaging, and that is SMPP messaging. Now, if you take a look at the right side of the screen, you can see the difference in the two messages. The one message on the left went through as a email message, and it missed information, and it got caught up. It can also show up in the wrong order, so that a most recent email message will reach the recipient far before the first one. True SMS is much more reliable, and that is obviously the message that's shown on the right. You want to be sure that the vendor that you're looking at does real SMS messaging and not something that was developed out of an email. Ahmad, maybe you could talk a little bit about this. What about where in the world can you be and launch a message with the Everbridge system?
Well, you can be just about anywhere. As I mentioned before, part of what we've done over the last year is really optimize our mobile capabilities, and there are really two types. The ability to launch a communication from a mobile application. And again, we built it specifically for each device. So the one for an iPhone will look and feel a little bit different for the one for an Android because we wanted somebody to just be able to pick up the device that they already use, they know how to use, and simply start using it. And it's not, again, a thin veneer. It's got deep functionality, so I can use my templates or my scenarios and look at my reports and record my voice, do everything that I need to do. And it's also optimized for adverse network conditions. So as long as I have some connectivity, I can send out a notification and get my reports back. But let me just add a couple of things to some of the statistics. In the sense we've been talking about Hurricane Sandy, that just should give you an idea as to where the world is going. So for Hurricane Sandy, if we look at the general population, so everybody, every vertical, every market, et cetera, about 61% of the notifications were received on using a voice path. So somebody actually picked up the phone, either landline or mobile, to actually listen to the notification and respond and confirm using a touchpad. And about just 12% on SMS. By contrast, if I take that general population and only look at colleges and universities, and again, same time period, same volume, same event, Hurricane Sandy, only 16% of the population in universities and colleges were reached using voice, versus almost 31% via SMS and 35% via email. So it gives you an idea as to this generational shift and how things are really changing and moving. So you have to be able to support true SMS, as you said, SMPP, Paul, as opposed to TP, and then be able to deal with additional capabilities in mobility. So the new frontier in mobility that people are really used to now is called push notification. So what we also offer is a downloadable application for free, on Google Play or on the iTunes Store. That's called, Mobile Member, where that primarily provides an additional path, an additional way for that recipient to be reached. It's not SMS, it's not email, it's not voice. It's a push notification that simply shows up, just like your sports notification or whatnot. And if you have an iPhone or an Android, you're used to those by now. And the nice thing is the application doesn't even have to be running, right? You just have to have accepted to receive those push notifications first and foremost when you install the application. And once you do that, you can very quickly then, with a swipe of a finger, say, yep, I'm confirming it, or I'm answering a multiple choice polling question. Again, that's key. Now, what's interesting about that is, what our research has shown, is that the people who download the Mobile Member application, the people who use and are subscribed to these push notifications will tend to confirm at a much higher rate. Well, why do you think that is? Well, it's interesting, right? And just in terms of looking at it even further, is because they know. What happens if they don't? Well, then chances are the right notification system will keep trying to reach them, and will try to reach them using multiple paths. And that next path might be an SMS, which is just a little bit more disruptive, and the next path might be even more disruptive, which is a phone call. So like, hey, you know what? If I just swipe my finger and confirm that I've received the notification and I've read it, I won't have to get that phone call. So again, from a mobile capability perspective, you have to have a vendor that thinks about what's going on from both sides. The people who are sending out the notifications, they need to be able to do this. If the internet is down and the only communication is via a very shaky cell phone connection, where they're doing it on the go from the scene of a particular event, but also from the mass perspective, the recipients across the board. Given this generational shift, et cetera, people are a lot more prone to responding to notifications when it's done via a channel that they remember, that they use on a regular basis. Back to you.
Thanks, Ahmad. Question number 4. Can you adapt my organization, or can you adapt to my organization communication needs? This is real straightforward stuff. And why it matters is that product adaptability, it can be a confusing word, or the adaptability word can be confusing. Much of this has to do with perception. If a vendor looks at adaptability, they might look at it as a way to take their vanilla type system into different applications. A buyer might rightfully look at adaptability as a way to fit a product into their existing work environment. Well, the result can be trying to put a square pegged system into a round hole. It is not going to work. You can adapt, and sometimes it makes sense to the system, but only if it makes sense for your business. You should not have to do that. You want to ask vendors how the system will adapt to your organizational structure and integrate with your processes. Check another important thing is to check a vendor's release cycle and check the history to see, or to at least get a feel for the product's evolution. Now, when it comes to this, Ahmad, which systems of ours can you integrate with?
So, you want a system like this to be both configurable and capable of doing integrations, right? So configurability is kind of key, and this way the answer to, every single question isn't, well, we can build that for you. So having the right number of knobs and switches in the application so it can adapt to your needs without necessarily requiring any heavy lifting is key, whether it's the way you set up your messages or the way you set up workflows or the user interface or permissions, etc. But still, you do need, in some cases, integration capabilities. The most common integrations that you certainly want to ask about is integration with your contact data, right? And wherever your contact data, the people who you're actually sending notifications to, wherever it is that it happens to live, you need to be able to handle it. It could be in an HR database, a 911 file, it could be an opt-in, and we'll talk about that, I believe, a little bit later. But you may also want to automate things. So you have a system going down somewhere. You want that to automatically trigger a well thought out and planned broadcast to a bunch of people with all the different things that a mass notification system worth its price can do, the escalations, the multiple paths, etc. Again, can you do that very simply? Have any system on the outside that you might be using automatically trigger a notification. You should be able to do that with literally one API or application programming interface call, something that could be done very quickly by anybody who knows anything about being able to, say, make an HTTP call out. So that level of integration is absolutely key. And then same thing on the way out. Something happens in a notification system. Do you want it to be able to integrate with an external system? In addition to sending a notification, do something else. That's absolutely key. So your data, your systems, being able to transfer your data in both directions easily enough, being able to pull data out of the system, including reports, so you can feed other systems from any time that you want, and being able to trigger everything, including the most complex notifications, automatically based on whatever else is whatever triggers you need, including some of your existing systems. Being able to integrate with your CAD systems if you're in a PSAP infrastructure. So all of that is absolutely key.
On to question 5. What's your plan for leveraging social media as a part of the mass communication system? Well, you can see that the mobile and social sides of the industry are changing everything. Many incidences in the past year, if there's breaking news out there, it's spread across social networks before any other communication pathway. The news, radio, or TV news, radio, no one picks it up, but it's on the social side first because of the people on the ground who are spreading this information. The social media, it's a huge, valuable tool, but it has to be controlled to be of benefit. If the important thing for mass notification systems is that people now expect the social side to be handled, and they expect that information to be used by mass notification systems. If the information is harnessed correctly, the social media information can provide great benefits. And while social media is to be used as generally an outbound communication tool, it's grown as an inbound and outbound source of incredibly valuable information. This is the first step in the evolution of mass notification, which is slowly becoming mass communication. And while administrators and organizers can't be everywhere every time, the public is aware of this, and they're becoming the eyes and ears on the ground and have already begun to share information with administrators so that the administrators can pass this information along. And I know, Ahmad, we keep we're really hitting the social side hard, but can I automatically notify key personnel or the people that are important to us if we have to have communication immediately, and do we have input, or do we have inbound and outbound communication capability?
So on the social media side, this is obviously an incredibly important area, but also emerging. And most people are, when they think about mass communication, they rush to one side of it, which is, hey, maybe I can do this on the cheap and simply post my my alert or my notification onto social media, and it'll take a life of its own. That's not the way it works. And that's not necessarily the best use of social media. It's one of the uses, which is to be able to copy or post or clone, or hopefully, if you're doing things right, create a suitable version of your notification that can be posted to various social media networks. But that's not what social media needs to be used for in mass communication, not primarily. Again, part of what you want to be able to do is understand what's happening with your situation as well as you can, right? Part of a good mass communication solution allows you to get feedback. It allows you to send out a notification and see who got it, get confirmations, so you know who needs potentially an additional communication to be sent their way. You can send out polling questions to see who's okay and who's not, who needs help, who has different needs. Part of social media and the way that it really needs to be used is mostly as an input. In terms of mass communication, for social media, you need to be doing more listening and less talking. And the right solution should be able to monitor social media for you and find the appropriate patterns that tell you that something is not right, something is different, and automatically alert the appropriate people based on the topic. So if you're a corporation and you want to make sure that if there is any sort of a rumor of a riot or a protest that might disrupt your business, you don't want to find out about that on the day of. You want the right people in security or business continuity to automatically be alerted when that happens, right? If you're in state and local, during Hurricane Sandy, for example, you could actually, in social media, harness some fantastic data about places that were hardly hit, or power was down, or gas stations that still had gas or didn't. But it's hard to go through, literally millions in this case of social media posts just to try to find the ones that make sense. The right solution will be able to filter all of that, summarize everything, and look at this stuff, social media, 24/7, and only alert you, again, with the appropriate escalation, et cetera, when there's something of relevance to you, particularly to your business, to your organization, to your constituents. Back to you.
Question 6. How will you help me manage my contact data? Well, this is a biggie. It's the old garbage in, garbage out scenario. A member or a user data, it has to be accurate for the system to perform properly. So the system must be able to provide multiple options to input data. You take situations where it's a major corporation, or even more so perhaps in higher education. You've got an incredible turnover in higher education, 30% or more per year. Well, that includes changes in addresses, phone numbers, parenting contact information, name changes. Well, the same is true in every corporation, government, or any other user, but it requires both the ability to put data in manually, to do something quickly, to put together a group or something, but it also requires the ability to put it in automatically. And in a corporation, for instance, you may have to interface, the IT department, human resources, as well as a wide variety of other departments to collect accurate data. It can be an overwhelming task unless the system is helpful in providing this. The system is only as good as the data that supports it. So you want to review with your vendor the various methods to manage the data in this system. How do they process uploads? How often? Is it automatic? Do they limit the number of updates you can send per month? Do they charge extra if you exceed the monthly limit? Can the updates be automated through your internal systems, or will you need to send a spreadsheet? These are all important questions, but in addition to this, you also want to be able to input data manually. And this is because you always want to be able to, as we said, put together, a group or change data for something that's very important. You want to ask the vendor to explain their ongoing data management strategies and methodologies for both manual and automated data entry. Now, Ahmad, what options do you have available for ongoing data management?
Just about everything you can think of. So, ultimately, you're absolutely right. You need the ability to do things manually, which means adding a contact or deleting or editing a contact manually, which you can do from the user interface. And again, it's key. You can do things fairly quickly. You can do that with any contact regardless of the source. So for those of you who are in local or state government, if you have a process for opting people out because you got your data through white pages or assessor records or even 911 and you want to be able to delete them, you don't want to go through a big process of doing that. Once you have the appropriate permissions, you can just go into the user interface and make the change. You can also do, through the user interface, load a comma separated value file. Basically, if you have it in an Excel spreadsheet or a text file, you can upload it, and all of a sudden the data is there. And whether that's an initial load or an update or a delete, you can do that again. It's manual, but it's in bulk. You can actually automate it as well. Automate it using it's called SFTP or Secure FTP. So you choose the software we're not going to install software on your site. You choose whichever way your IT wants to do Secure FTP, and then once a day or once an hour you can upload a file, and again that updates, that deletes, that makes the appropriate changes automatically. Or you can even go with a full-blown application programming interface. Again, a little piece of code that we provide you with that then simply goes in and can change things in real time from another system. So it could be your HR database, so that if an employee is terminated, they can also automatically be removed from the contact data. You can do that as well. And then, just as importantly, the ability to provide the recipients with self-service capabilities. So in the cases of a state and local government, that might be an opt-in portal. So for people to come in and register, give their address, and based on their address, they can get the appropriate alerts and notifications. That's a portal that's open to everybody. And there is a private version to it for universities and for corporations. So people can do more self-service. So in some cases, you might have data that comes from your database, from your HR database, that nobody can change, such as their employee ID and their desk phone number, etc. But other data which they can provide you with, which you may not have. So you might want to have that hybrid approach. Again, very easy to set up, so that their personal cell phone and their personal email, which again will only be used in case of an emergency, they can provide that to you via self-service portal. You won't be able to necessarily see it, but you'll know it's there and you'll be able to reach them. So lots of different options, some manual, some automated, some in between, with just about every piece of flexibility that you could possibly want is in there, and you have to have that. Don't settle for anything other than that full range of capabilities.
Question 7. What are the types of communications can your solution help with? Well, this matters because in the not-so-distant past, the emergency notification systems were an out only, but social media, of course, and mobile capabilities have changed this. Today, with social media networks, two-way communication is available and necessary. Social media members now provide capability to mass notification systems with information that system administrators use that they've never had before. The point is that the mass notification system must constantly be able to adjust to the changing needs and technologies that the market brings. Make sure to ask any potential vendor to demonstrate how they track and report the in and out messaging information and how best to use that. Now, if we look at Everbridge, Ahmad, what have you built in to the Everbridge system to handle the flexibility to handle different business uses?
Well, actually quite a few. So yeah, a lot of people use it for emergency notifications or mass notifications. But one of the things that we learned from a best practice perspective is if you find a way for the system to be used on a more regular basis, well, guess what? It'll be more effective because you'll be, in effect, testing it constantly, right? You'll know that your data, as far as the contact information is correct, or if not, you'll be updating it as you go, as opposed to finding out, on the eve or the day of a big event that, wow, half these phone numbers were out of date or whatnot. So finding daily uses or more common uses is absolutely key. So in a state and local government situation, right, what are called community notices or alerts for anything from exceptions to parking bans to trash collection are absolutely key. And you can make those very easily available. So people are more likely to opt in and give you more information and use that on a more regular basis. In most of the markets and applications, workforce management, we've got capabilities that say, hey, you know what? I need 4 people with the following skills for an extra shift tonight. Well, guess what? If the skills are entered as part of the data, we can very, very quickly within the system say, send it out to everybody who's got these skills, but I only need 4. So as soon as 4 respond that they can, the system will automatically tell anybody else after that who says that they can, sorry, the quota has been filled. We thank you very much for what you've done here and volunteering. So lots of capabilities across the board that are enabled due to the flexibility of the system. And that can include things like travel check-in. Hey, you want to make sure that you know where your traveling employees are. So as soon as they get to where they're supposed to, through the mobile member application, just come in and say, okay, I'm checking in. Their location is automatically reported. The fact that they've checked in is automatically reported. Again, part of the system that can be used for all these types of communications so that on a daily basis it's used and everybody is sensitized to it, trained, and the data is good.
Oh, question 8. How can your system help me communicate to stakeholders outside the United States? Well, certainly with multinational corporations and the shrinking world, the end users of mass notification systems expect the system to be able to reach them wherever they might be in the world. Does a vendor that you're looking at provide that ability? Does it provide encryption? Are they encryption capable? Without looking into local regulations, they may not qualify to send information around. So I would guess that this is certainly a growing trend, and again, as mobile and the social media are expectations of a capable system, so would international calling. If we look at this, Ahmad, what are you doing as far as steps to take to minimize communication issues for international calls?
Well, doing communications on a global basis is actually pretty tough. So it's not just a matter of sending an email or making a phone call. When you're doing it on a massive or a large-scale basis, it's complicated. So there are 2 different approaches to it, or 2 different angles that one needs to consider. One is if you happen to be outside the United States. So all you care about is your local area, and that could be the US, it could be Canada, it could be the UK. So you want a provider that looks and feels local and whose system is, in many ways, local. And then there's the second angle, which is you're a multinational. You care about Canada and the US and the UK, etc. And you don't want to have 3 different systems. You want a system that interoperates and gives you a global view of everything. So what are some of the issues? And I'll set aside the multilingual issues. Again, any system worth its salt should be able to send out notifications in multiple languages, handle multiple language characters, have a user interface for the administrator as well as the recipient in multiple languages. So let's just assume for now that that's all in there. Let's talk about the real complex stuff, the stuff that vendors will not necessarily be forthcoming with, right? So first, it's as simple as where is the data stored? So chances are if you're in Canada, and you probably want your data stored in Canada for a variety of regulations, depending on which industry you're in. If you're somewhere in the European Union, you probably want your data in the European Union as well, right? So can the system actually store the data in multiple places? And again, if you're a multinational, You don't want to have 3 different systems. You want a single one that gives you a view of all your employees if the person is entitled to see all that information, even though ultimately the data is stored in multiple locations because you're complying with regulations in multiple areas. Then it's about communications. What about voice? Again, some people will simply say, well, don't worry, I'll include all the international calls. There's more to it than just cost. Being able to originate a call from Canada or from the UK when the recipient is in the UK is absolutely key, because the thing that tends to start falling apart during international calls are things like how quickly the connection is made and connected, which impacts the performance of the system, but also things as simple as caller ID. Will the caller ID actually show up? Think about it for a second. What happens if the caller ID doesn't show up or is mangled? Because you have to be able to set your own caller ID, by the way. Anything that you want. Your system has to be able to do that. Well, if people don't recognize it, what will they not do? They will not pick up. If they don't pick up, you haven't reached them. Right? So you don't want that. So by providing and initiating the calls locally, in a variety of countries around the world and regions, you are ensuring a much higher success. And then the same thing with SMS. Again, in the U.S., we use a U.S. short code because we have to comply with a bunch of regulations in the U.S. In Canada, we use a Canada short code. Right? In the UK, you use a UK code. This way, no matter where your recipient is, they get a text with a local identifier. So when they respond to it to confirm, again, they're not making an international SMS. They're not sending an international SMS, which costs more. So again, they're more likely to actually send it. And you're complying with all the rules and regulations. If you try to send a high volume of text in the U.S. with a long code, well, guess what happens probably at the worst possible time? It might get shut down by the carriers. So you have to know how to comply with the rules and regulations in every market that you're in, but hopefully you don't have to do it on your own. Your vendor can do that. So be sure to ask all these questions. Where is the data stored? How is the voice originated, or where the voice calls originated from? How is the SMS handled, and what kind of codes do you have, and what regulations do you comply with around the world, etc.
Question number 9, how can you facilitate two-way real-time communication? Well, we've discussed the changes in mobile devices, we've discussed social media, but there are other important, and Ahmad just alluded to one with the quota requirement. That was the beginning of two-way communication. It's changed a lot and been enhanced, but those basic functions are still there. So is a conference bridge. Conference bridges, they're great because they enable invited groups to gather, share information, and discuss the direction to take. You want to be sure, though, that any prospective vendor is using current technology for their conference bridges. The information for whether it is a conference bridge or any other type of two-way communication has to be easy to access, it has to be concise, and it has to have accurate reporting. Reporting and tracking is important here because the change in dimension of the entire process. The two-way communication is doubled, at least double the tracking requirement that a system has. So, Ahmad, if we look at the Everbridge system now, how can your solution help me to connect with critical personnel and key people in an emergency?
So a couple of things. I think you mentioned quota. You mentioned what's called instant bridge, so the ability to automatically connect people as soon as they respond into a bridge, so they don't have to actually dial a whole bunch of different numbers, etc. So lots of things in basic notification that can facilitate two-way communication, be able to capture extra information from people no matter how you reach them via phone, such as asking multiple choice question. That's part of two-way communication that's in real time. Now, what's getting more important is to increase the level of richness of that communication. With the mobile member application that I mentioned before, your recipients not only can send you back an answer to a multiple choice question, but at the same time, they're sending you automatically their location if you've enabled that capability. So you can see where people are. So they can be your first responders, or they can be your employees, so you know where they are when they're sending that response. Again, assuming you have their permission in the application. They can even actually send you a picture of what they're seeing. This is key. This is what the level of richness is all about. So now, if you've got people who are first responders on the ground, or you've got employees in remote offices, they can actually tell you right then and there when there is an incident, here's what we're seeing. And you can get now different perspectives from different people that can actually help complete the full picture of a situation. That's key for two-way communications. You can enable these employees to also send you unsolicited messages. Again, that's completely up to you. It's configurable by you, so that when there is something that they want to report, it comes back to that same channel, including, again, automatic location, automatic, the images being captured, all that being put on the exact same map that you can then use to send out notifications by drawing a circle or a shape of your choosing. All of that is simply standard within the application.
And question 10, is the system easy to use, and does it come with training? Everyone out there who is marketing a system will tell you that ease of use is one of the strengths of our system. Okay, if everybody says that, okay, I guess they all must be easy. Well, they're not. When considering any notification system, you've got to determine whether the average employee will be able to use the system with little or no training, or if the system will require some sort of specialist, which is a problem. Many of the notification products that are on the market today have all sorts of bells and whistles that are built in, but they're primarily focused towards a highly technical user. So when a crisis happens, sometimes the person who's trained on the system, who thinks they know the system and who uses it every day, kind of freezes up. And the system has to be able to be easy enough to use to overcome that obstacle. A system that looks good during a demo may not be as good a system in a crisis, and the people who are working with that have to be comfortable with it. So, as far as the Everbridge system is concerned, Ahmad, what my end users evaluate the system? Can they do it firsthand? Can you provide access to training material? Before I become a customer, are you going to provide information for me to make this decision easier?
Yeah, you'll be able to actually take a look at how the system works. Anybody, for example, who uses an iPhone or an Android should be able to pick up the mobile version, and you can actually go and read the reviews right now on the iTunes store and see what people think of it. But yeah, if you know how to use that, you should be able to send notifications pretty easily. But in addition to that, for the power users, we've got this thing called Everbridge University. We believe it's probably first of its kind in certainly our industry, because it's not just another set of videos or PowerPoints. It's a full-blown learning management system with mini quizzes at the end, a bunch of 3 to 5 to maybe 10-minute courses that are online that your employees or yourself, you can go through at your own pace, and it tracks your progress. It asks you questions at the end to make sure you've gotten the actual concepts. It can go from the very simple to the incredibly detailed to make you a real power user and really an industry know-it-all across the board. All at your own pace. It'll keep track of it. So it's behind a login that is personal to you, and you can actually get the certification that you need on it. All of that is easily seen and evaluated, and we think it's a big part of what a system should look like, and it's constantly updated.
And finally, our cheat sheet. No one's ever used these before, but here's one for you. It's the first time. It's a review of the questions and the 10 follow-up questions. So it obviously just suggestions, but when you're talking to a prospective vendor, the goal is to ask tough questions. You want to see them sweat, and make sure you're comfortable with the answers that they give you. If not, just make them sweat some more. We hope you can use these questions to help evaluate a mass notification system, and make the proper choices and be comfortable with that. So we want to now take a look at. In fact, Ahmad is going to show you the Everbridge suite of products.
Yeah, again, I know we're getting to close to the end of time here, so hopefully you can bear with us another 5 minutes or so. But I certainly urge you to take a look at the Everbridge suite. It's a full-blown mass notification suite that can leverage not only for emergency notification, but also for some of those day-to-day communications that I mentioned before. It's built on an incredibly advanced platform that has a huge amount of capacity, that elastic infrastructure that I mentioned before. It's got a brand new user interface that's been absolutely optimized to keep people on their toes, but also minimize any sort of mistakes and anxiety. It's got all the mobile capabilities that we talked about, both for the people sending as well as the people receiving, so they can really start using the system more efficiently, but also so you can have multiple redundant ways of getting to somebody. It's got the full social monitoring and alerting capabilities, so that, you know what, even when you're sleeping, our system is not, and is constantly monitoring things on your behalf and alerting you when there is a problem. It's got weather capabilities, same thing, if there's an issue, you can be alerted. And it's got that real two-way communication with extremely rich information coming in both directions. That's called interactive visibility. So I urge you to take a look. You know, we're around. We can certainly show you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have after this.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much, Greg and Ahmad. We are running a little bit late. We're going to extend the session by 5 minutes and take any questions that you have. The easiest way to submit your questions is to type them into the question panel on the right-hand side. Ahmad, the first question we have relates to some GIS mapping. And Alan asks, how is GIS mapping integrated into the notification process?
So GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, used to be used mostly by state and local governments as a way to determine who got a notification. So typically, you'd have people's, in addition to their phone numbers, you'd have their addresses, and you'd be able to plot them on a map and then say, hey, anybody who's within a mile of this or within this zip code should get that notification. It's now being used across the board. Corporations, healthcare facilities, etc., so that you can potentially do the exact same thing. So this is actually tightly integrated into the Everbridge suite. So when you upload your contacts, or when the contacts come in and opt in or give you the information, if they give you addresses, and they could be 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 addresses, it's my work address and my home address and my kid's school, etc., all of that goes automatically through a process called geocoding, where we basically determine for that physical address what's the longitude and latitude, where does it show up on a map, so that the person who's about to send a notification can determine that instead of sending a notification based on some other criteria, like somebody's skills or whatnot, that they'll do it based on where they live or work. And simply by going into the user interface, you see a map, you can type in an address or a point of interest, and then either have a pre-drawn, what's called a polygon or a shape, or put in an address and say anybody within a mile radius should be notified, etc. So that's how GIS fits in.
All right, great. We actually have another sort of location-based question. In question 9, we talked about the system being able to identify the location of a responding individual. Is this based on the address with which they registered, or some sort of Latin longitude?
Well, if we're talking about the two-way communication, then if they have this mobile member application, then again, if it's allowed on both ends, then when that person with the mobile member application responds, their location is transmitted. And then it can be shown on that map, the same map that you're using for GIS. And how is that captured? Well, it's based on where they are right now. It's based on what the phone is telling us, based on either GPS or cell phone tower triangulation or a well-known Wi-Fi system.
All right. Well, we've got time for one last question, and it's a great question. Mark asks, it's important to know the company's SLA, but it's also important to know what the internal capabilities are of your own company. Can you handle 10,000 voice calls over a 15-minute period without the system shutting down? How does Everbridge work with companies to help them understand that?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'm going to answer another question that I saw just in case. So given that we're talking about SLAs, or service level agreements, was I think what somebody was asking. A service level agreement is obviously part of your overall contract to understand how the other party is going to perform. So for us, obviously, sending 10,000 calls within 15 minutes is really easy and simple, and something that we do on a daily basis. But yeah, the problem is the person on the other side, the company on the other side, may not be able to handle those. So typically we'll work with that company to understand their capacity, and then we have capabilities that are called call throttling. So when we're calling to a certain area or a certain PBX, or even an entire broadcast, that we actually slow it down so we don't overwhelm a system that may only be capable of handling 15,000 calls in 15 minutes. So we can go as fast as a system will be able to take it, but we can also very quickly slow it down, and all of that is easily configurable. That's part of the configurability of the system. It's not something where you have to call us up and we have to get engineers on the phone, et cetera. All done via the user interface. We can slow the system down to be able to handle or make sure we're not overwhelming any system that's out there.
All right. Well, that's great. That is the last question we'll be able to take today. Thank you very much, Greg and Ahmad, for a great session, and thank you to all of our attendees who were able to join us. If anyone missed any part of the webinar, we are recording it, and we'll send a link to you via email in the next couple of days. If you're looking for additional information, please visit the Everbridge website and check out the Resource Center for access to a lot of additional